What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Drew Dillman YouTube video. We're looking at homegrown gravel. It's 100 miles. It's in Franklin, Georgia, and with non-stop rolling hills all day, the climbing is not insignificant. Formerly known as Border Wars, half the race happens in Georgia and half of it happens in Alabama. Almost all on dirt with some connections made on paved roads. Now, since this is the first race of the season, y'all are dying to know what my equipment setup is. I'm on that Lauf Segla with that suspension fork that they're famous for. Thank you to my teammate and good friend Chase Work for making that connection happen. I'm super thrilled to be sponsored by Lauf for 2025. Along with that, I've got the SRAM 13-speed Explorer. I've got a 48-tooth chainring in the front with that 1046-tooth cassette in the back. However, the 46-tooth was, let's say, inaccessible because I had forgot to put a longer chain on because the bike came with a smaller front chainring and I put that bigger front chainring on. I had meant to put on a longer chain before the race. Totally spaced on that. And then the question y'all are dying to know is, what tires were you running, Dizzle? Well, it was on those Schwalbe G1 RS. So that's the faster tire with less tread and a 50 mil width. Now this race starts in the middle of Franklin, Georgia, but within a mile we're already on dirt roads, which is pretty cool. And then shortly after that, we're on the only single track portion of the course. Now this is a good thing to keep in the back of my mind. Here at the beginning of the race, that single track section was neutral, so it wasn't that big of a deal that we sprint to go into it and get good positioning. You can see a couple guys pass me throughout that section. I'm not too worried about it because the race was supposed to be neutral for the first 3 or 4 miles until a specific road that they had told us would then open the race up. And so I wasn't too worried about positioning going into it, but I am going to keep that in the back of my head because with that single track section being only like a mile from the finish, if I'm going into that section with a group, you know I'm attacking through that section to try to create some separation if that needs to happen. Canadian pro and former lifetime GP athlete Andrew Lesprance is going to put in a little bit of a dig here. I'm going to chase it down. Now, I have 3 riders really on my radar for this race. I got Andrew Lesprance, who I know is strong. I got Michael Garrison, who won this race last year, so you know he's going to be strong. And then you got Ian Boswell, former World Tour pro. So those 3 guys are on my radar as marked riders. Now, I was staying with Ian and Andrew and Lauren De Crescenzo, and that made the trip a lot more fun. I have come to the conclusion in my days of racing now that whenever possible, I'm going to try to stay with other people. I didn't even know Lesby or LDC going into this weekend, but by staying in a house with them and crashing on that couch, I got to know those two riders, and that's pretty cool. That's a cool thing about this sport, is we're always getting opportunities to meet new people, and I could have just dropped in, got a hotel, did the race, drove home, but the whole experience was so much more enjoyable because I got to hang out and meet new people. And that's where Dizzle Kibitz number 14 comes in. Always stay with friends. It's more fun this way. Now Garrison's going to counter-attack Lesby's dig, which is a really good move on his part. He carries a bunch of momentum and gets a gap immediately. And you can see that everybody pretty much reacts to that. And Angelo Esprance is going to start the chase, and then he's going to flick me through. And I'm going to pull through, but I'm not going to pull through at max effort, because I am convinced that with one rider off the front, yes, Michael Garrison is one of the marked riders on my list, but I don't think that he's strong enough to solo 90 miles of this race by himself, especially since there's a few other strong guys like Lesby and Ian that are still in this group. So I'm not totally convinced that we need to put in all of our chips to chase him down. In fact, it might even be strategic to let him sit out there for a little bit and waste some energy. So I'm going to pull through, not at max effort, because I'm always thinking in the back of my head, how can I conserve energy? Conserving energy is not a bad thing. That's a race tactic. And in fact, let me tell you something, it's allowed. You're allowed to conserve energy in a race. In fact, I would even say you're smarter for trying to conserve energy. Now, I don't want to make Lesby mad. I don't want to make everybody else mad. So I am going to pull through, but I'm not going to bury myself to chase this guy down this early in the race. Dizzle Kibitz number 15, conserve energy whenever possible. But it also kind of depends on who that rider is that goes off the front, because if you don't remember, not that long ago, in fact the last race that I did, the BWR Mexico race, a guy went off the front and he soloed the entire race. So it does depend on who that one rider who goes up the road is, and you gotta be able to know your competition to know which riders to chase and which ones to let dangle. Now within this first hour of racing or so, we didn't really start going hard until about 30 minutes in, and then after that 30 minutes I averaged, for 37 minutes I averaged 310 normalized, which is a 0.85 intensity factor from about miles 9 to 22, and then within that there was a 5-minute effort around mile 14 that was at a 400 watt or 1.09 intensity factor. That gives you a rough idea of what the first hour looked like. We do end up catching Garrison after a few minutes of chasing, and as you can tell, there are a few rough downhill sections in this course, but nothing crazy. But it was crazy enough to cause a puncture on my rear tire. So as soon as we hit the next paved section, I can tell immediately that I barely have any air in my rear tire. So I pull over, I examine it to see if there's any sealant coming out. I don't see any sealant. I don't see any gashes or any cuts or anything sticking out of the tire, so I'm thinking, okay, I think it just needs to be aired up. So hopefully whatever caused it has sealed, and I'm gonna hit it with this CO2. I'm stopped for 53 seconds, it's aired up, and I'm on my way chasing. Now when you're chasing, you've got really 3 options you can choose from. Number 1, give up. Nah, I wasn't gonna do that. Number 2, try to chase down that gap as quick as possible. And the gap was 53 seconds, and so I didn't think it made much sense for me to try to chase that down as quick as possible because it was a little too big for that. Because if you go that route of chasing it down as quick as possible, and if you don't get there, you kind of blow up and then you're screwed. Option number 3, which is what I decided to do, was to go in for the long haul and say, okay, I'm gonna chase this down, but I'm gonna try to do it over the course of maybe 30 minutes. And that's where I had landed, and that's what I was gonna try to do.
Back here.
Flat tire.
Oh. Are those mountain bike tires?
No.
That's the problem.
Yeah. I'm not gonna hear the end of it.
Well, now my feet are all over. My butt's wet.
I would have bunny hopped if you guys weren't going so slow.
And for the next 31 minutes, my normalized power was 325 watts, which is about 90% of my FTP. And I had already caught a few groups of riders. However, after 10 miles of chasing, I had to stop again for what seemed like a second puncture. And this time I was a little more cautious because I only had one more CO2 cartridge, and then I was deserted. Didn't have any other CO2s or a pump, so I would have been on the side of the road with my thumb out, hitching a ride. So I wanted to make sure that whatever caused that flat wasn't gonna rear its ugly head. And so this time I was stopped for a little over 2 minutes before I got rolling again, and it seemed like the issue was resolved. At this point, the hopes of me catching back up after spending 3 minutes on the side of the road fixing flats seemed pretty unlikely. However, I still wasn't ready to throw in the towel completely because this race has a pretty good prize purse. And to be quite honest, this was the main reason I was at this race, is because the winner got $2,000. And looking at the start list, I thought maybe I had a shot at winning $2,000. Why wouldn't you go for $2,000 if it's within driving distance and so on and so forth? But Dizzle Kibitz number 16, don't count your prize money too early. So at this point, I'm thinking I'm probably not going to win, probably not going to see the leaders again, but maybe, just maybe, I can put in a big effort for the next 70 miles and chase my way back up to maybe 4th or 5th place, because the prize purse went 5 deep, and if I won a couple $100, hey, that seems kind of worth it. For the first hour of my chase, my normalized power was 291 watts. For the second hour of my chase, my normalized power was 292 watts. For the third hour of my chase, my normalized power was 280 watts. And for the last 30 minutes of the race, my normalized power was 285 watts. The entire race took me about 5 hours and 12 minutes, 326 TSS, 7,600 feet of climbing, 290 normalized power, and a 260 average. This was good enough to get me a 9th place, not quite in the money, about 5 minutes off of that 5th place finish and about 17 minutes off of victory. I also don't have any heart rate data from this race because Doofus me forgot to pack it, which is Dizzle Kibitz number 17. Always use a packing list. Overall, I was a little bummed about the result, but kind of satisfied with the effort. I came here to win some money, and I'm going home empty-handed, but overall, happy that I got a good, hard race in, and now I know what tires to not use in the future. Now, I was going into this race pretty fatigued at the end of a 3-week block with my form on Training Peaks being a -15, which isn't quite ideal for race day. But again, I don't want to sacrifice training this early in the season when I have much bigger races on the calendar moving forward. So I went into this race carrying some fatigue and still was able to manage a pretty good effort for the day. That's all I got for this one. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.